though it ends. The NFL season comes to a close for so many across the league. And the coaching tenure of most of the NFC East comes to an end. But with every end, there is a beginning. It's the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, Sirius XM Channel 80. Will Cain filling in for Le Batard and Stu Gatz today. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on all those same television and radio channels. It's over. A season of nightmare is over. It's over for the Dallas Cowboys. And it looks to be the end of the Jason Garrett era in Dallas. But with every end, there is a beginning. It is time. It is time to start a new era in Dallas. An era not of mediocrity, but of excellence. Coming up on today's show, we'll talk about who the coaching carousel spins for. Who would you prioritize? What are your top candidates that you'd like to see for your team? The Washington Redskins, the Carolina Panthers, likely the Dallas Cowboys, all looking for coaches. Breaking news of the day is that the New York Giants have fired head coach Pat Shurmur, making it probably 3 of 4 teams in the NFC East looking for a new head coach. But before we move forward, let us look back. Who had the most disappointing season in the NFL this year? This has been some subject of debate today. I heard it on Get Up. I heard Rex Ryan, Dan Orlovsky, and others talking about whether or not it was the Cowboys or the Browns, who went into this season with more hype and failed to live up to it. I think we should add a third candidate to that debate of disappointment, and that would be the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams went into this season appearing to be on the opening end of a Super Bowl window. After losing the New England Patriots last year, it looked like Sean McVay and Jared Goff would be not just in the playoffs, but possibly in the championship game for years to come. In fact, that promise was so sparkling that almost every team in the NFL tried to find a head coach with some connection to Sean McVay. But 1 year later, despite a 9-7 record, the Rams are not in the playoffs. So who has had the most disappointing season in 2019? Is it the Los Angeles Rams, the Cleveland Browns, or the Dallas Cowboys? You can answer that question at 888-729-3776 on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. On Get Up, as I mentioned, Rex Ryan and Dan Orlovsky registered their vote. First, our good friend, ESPN football analyst Dan Orlovsky, said it was the Cleveland Browns. Listen.
It's the runaway Browns. I mean,
Really?
Baker Mayfield broke Peyton Manning's rookie touchdown passing record. They have a leading rusher in the NFL. Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry both own historical records when it comes to receiving in the NFL. Myles Garrett is a budding star, and they have 2 basically first-round picks at corner in Denzel Ward and Greedy Williams. This is a team that had incredible expectations with talent and also the easiest schedule in the NFL the last half of the season. And even in the midst of that, they go 4-4. They were 1-4 in their final 5 games. They didn't even win good games. Even their 6 wins were ugly.
It's true, the Browns were disappointing. This was a team that people picked to possibly represent the AFC in the AFC Championship game. It was a team that people looked at on paper and said, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Baker Mayfield after that rookie season, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. The talent is overflowing in Cleveland. But yet, there were voices of reason. Yet, there was a vision of sanity. It came from various corners. Stephen A. Smith on First Take, Will Cain on The Will Cain Show, said there's a vast difference between what exists on paper and what gets put on the field. And if you're going to put that kind of talent, better yet, those kind of egos together, you better have somebody who can bring it together. You better have a head coach with authority. You better have a head coach with some vision. Freddie Kitchens was not that guy. The Cleveland Browns, too, will be looking for a new head coach this offseason. Yesterday, Freddie Kitchens was notified that he would not be retained as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. So there was some vision of sanity when it came to the Cleveland Browns. There was some pushback to the hype. In fact, former NFL head coach Rex Ryan was somebody who pushed back on that hype. So it's a little surprising that he agreed with Orlovsky that the Browns were the most disappointing team. Listen.
All the hype. Man, they bring in Odell, everybody else. I bought into that stuff as well. I mean, man, there was
The only thing consistent was their inconsistency. Baker Mayfield went from being, I said he's most overrated player in the league or overrated as hell or whatever. Why? Because it's factual. I mean, this guy's doing 1 million commercials like he was, a superstar, had done something in the league, hadn't done anything. Hindsight, I go back, but that's why I'm so mad at myself. But man, you bring in that kind of talent and lay this kind of egg, it was brutal.
It was brutal, and the Cleveland Browns were disappointing, but they were not the most disappointing team in the league this year. Neither were the Los Angeles Rams. It's true, this was supposed to be the opening of a Super Bowl window. But the Rams, while not living up to expectations, still managed to put together a 9-7 season. That 9-7 season was just met with not one but two teams in their division that looked to be Super Bowl contenders. Are the Seattle Seahawks really Super Bowl contenders? We'll get into that a little bit later here on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gotts, Will Cain filling in. But still, it was the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks running away with that division from early in the year. It left the Rams looking for the 6th seed in the NFC playoffs. It left the Rams looking for the last of the 2 wildcard spots. And that was too much. Too much for a team that, yes, was also a disappointment, but not the most disappointing team in the league this year. The most disappointing team in the league this year was the one that I lived with week in and week out. It was the one that I suffered the highs, and they were rare, and the lows with you every day on the Will Cain Show. The most disappointing team in the league was the one with the most talent and the least leadership. The most disappointing team in the league was the one that once again settled for mediocrity. The most disappointing team in the league was the Dallas Cowboys. Let me give you one stat that exemplifies just how disappointing this Dallas Cowboy team was this year. This is from Bobby Belt, who covers the Dallas Cowboys. Since 1990, there have been 163 teams that have finished the season with a point differential of 100 or greater. That means scored 100 more points than their opponents did this season. The Cowboys are the only one of those 163 teams to finish the season with a 500 or worse record. Now that is a special kind of disappointment. That is a special form of dysfunction. This isn't your run-of-the-mill mediocrity. This isn't your everyday disappointment. This is a special kind of disappointment. To take that much talent, that much offensive capability, that much domination against bad opponents, that much bad luck, to add up to that much disappointment in a season. It is, once again, something that falls on leadership. It is another season that lays at the feet of Jason Garrett. There's expected to be a meeting in Dallas at noon today, a team meeting between Jason Garrett and the players, followed shortly by a meeting between Jason Garrett and Jerry Jones. It is expected that after that meeting, Jason Garrett will be relieved of his duties as head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. It means the era of mediocrity, the Jason Garrett era, the era of disappointment in Dallas comes to an end. But as I said, with every end, there is a beginning. What comes next in Dallas? What comes next in Cleveland? What comes next in New York? The playoffs for the NFL are set. And we'll be getting into who goes into the playoffs hot, who's capable of making a run, which quarterbacks deserve to have flowers thrown at their feet, which are overpraised, and who can actually win the Super Bowl. A little bit later here on the Dan Le Batard Show, Will Cain filling in. But for now, if eras are coming to an end in Dallas and Cleveland and New York, in Carolina, who's ready to start something anew? Which are the top coaching candidates in the coaching carousel? Who would you want? Urban Meyer, Ron Rivera, Lincoln Riley, Matt Rule to be the next head coach of your team. I'll tell you the top candidates and my picks to fill those top jobs coming up on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gotts, presented by Progressive Insurance. It's Will Cain filling in.
Radio.
Black Monday in the NFL, and so the coaching carousel spins. Where would it land? Where should it land? Where do you hope it lands for your favorite team? It's the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz on ESPN Radio. Will Cain filling in, presented by Progressive Insurance. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and ESPN News. The breaking news of the day is that New York Giants head coach Pat Shurmur has been fired. This follows Freddie Kitchens out as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. The Washington Redskins will be looking for a new head coach as well, as will the Carolina Panthers. We await word on teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Dallas Cowboys. But with so many teams looking for head coaches and more certain to join them, where would you hope? Where should you hope? The coaching carousel spins for your favorite team. I know this. I know what I want in a head coach, and I know what I don't. Who that leaves me with? Well, let's determine. Every year in the NFL, certain qualities when it comes to a head coach are prioritized. I think you can almost put these head coaches in 3 different categories. You can put retreads, guys who have coached in the NFL at the highest level and have been met with some success and some failure. Let us not just dismiss the idea of retreads, because at one point in his career, Bill Belichick would have been dropped into this category. A second category would be scheme geniuses, guys who teams think they can hire, will come in, set the league ablaze, bring the best out of their quarterback, and be the second coming of Sean McVay. Last year's coaching cycle was full of these kind of candidates. And the third, the most underrated category, probably because it's the hardest to define and definitely the hardest to fill, is the leadership category. These are men not defined by any particular trait, not any particular scheme, but simply know how to get 52 men headed in the same direction and able to pivot on a dime when a game plan or a season calls for it. This is the pond I want to fish out of. This is the bucket from which I want to pull a head coach. Now let's talk about the names most likely to be bantered about over the next couple of weeks. You have, in the retread category, guys like Mike McCarthy, the former head coach of the Green Bay Packers. You have Ron Rivera, the recently fired coach of the Carolina Panthers. In the scheme category, you will have guys like Lincoln Riley, the head coach of the University of Oklahoma. Most likely, Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. And in the leadership category, you will have candidates like Baylor head coach Matt Rule, a guy who was won at Temple, and now a guy who was won at Baylor, inheriting a program who was absolutely, not just in the doldrums, but engulfed in scandal and set ablaze with transfers and problems in Waco. So which would you want? Let's add a few more names if we can to this list. Urban Meyer's name has been mentioned continuously in the coaching search. It looks like he's ready to return and would like to return to the NFL. I think Urban Meyer fits into the leadership category. Let me talk to you about Urban Meyer for just a moment. I'm going to acknowledge something. I'm a hypocrite. I own a lot of hypocrisy when it comes to Urban Meyer. A year ago on the Will Cain Show, I said this guy needed to be out as the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, and mostly for a failure of leadership. The scandals, the problems that followed from Florida to Ohio State. To me, it didn't add up to somebody that could be or should be the leader of young men, 18 to 22-year-old men. Better yet, 18 to 22-year-old arriving men in this world, still being shaped, still becoming who they are. A year later, I look at Urban Meyer, and he's among my top candidates on the wish list for the next coach of the Dallas Cowboys, and largely because I consider him a leader who has won everywhere he has gone, from Bowling Green to Utah to Florida to Ohio State. But I'm being a hypocrite. Yeah, I can distinguish some things. You know, there's a difference between a pro and an amateur athlete. There's a difference between a 25-year-old and a 19-year-old. I can draw distinctions. But I said that this weekend when I was hosting Fantasy Football Now, the show I do from 10 to 1 on Sundays, getting you ready for your lineup heading into kickoff. I said that to one of my co-hosts, fantasy expert Matthew Berry, and he said to me, yeah, there's just something about, murderers that I think are a problem, whether or not you're in college or in the pros. And it's a good rebuttal. It's a good observation about Urban Meyer and Aaron Hernandez. How much did he know? How much did he overlook? I'll tell you this. I'm excited about a Netflix documentary that's coming out in a few weeks that chronicles the life of Aaron Hernandez. Tonight, I'm going to get on a plane and head to New Mexico to visit my family. And I'm going to be listening to a podcast that I just downloaded about Aaron Hernandez, how much they knew in Bristol, Connecticut, how much they knew in Florida, how much they knew in New England. And I know by the end of that documentary or the end of this podcast, I'm going to be facing some hypocrisies of my own when it comes to Urban Meyer. I see all those W's and I too begin to overlook things. Still, he's right in the mix at the top of my wish list for the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I want to fish in the leadership bucket. I want Matt Rule. I want Urban Meyer. I want a John Harbaugh type. And perhaps that means Jim Harbaugh. I'm willing to look over into the scheme bucket. I'm willing to get intoxicated by the idea of Lincoln Riley, who, by the way, I think has shown some versatility, shown some leadership in his ability to go from Baker Mayfield to Kyler Murray to Jalen Hurts, who's a very different quarterback and who's met success, at least on the offensive side of the ball, for season after season with quarterback after quarterback at Oklahoma. But more than scheme, definitely more than a retread, more than a boy genius, more than the next coming of Sean McVay, I want a leader. I want somebody who can pivot. I want somebody who can inspire men. I'm reading a book right now. This book's called Range, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. It's by David Epstein. And it's really fascinating. Basically, the book is about the difference between Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. Tiger Woods is a specialist. He was raised from the age of 1 to be a golf genius. He had talent. His dad recognized it, and his dad cultivated it. Everything Tiger Woods did from about 1, to this point in his life, has been honed, shaped, refined to be the greatest golfer that ever lived. Roger Federer didn't start playing real competitive tennis until he was like 13 or 14 years old. He played some soccer. He skateboarded. He played like 10 different sports. Roger Federer was a generalist. The idea is that while we give so much attention to the 10,000 hour rule, you've heard about that. Give 10,000 hours of determined practice. We give so much attention to the Tiger Woods of the world. We don't pay attention to the generalists. And when it comes to leadership, when it comes to actually living a successful life, a broad life, a life that can handle problems, a versatile life, a flexible life, one that can pivot and handle new problems, it's generalists who have seen different areas of life, different positions, different jobs, and be able to find success in all of those arenas and pull lessons from all of those different worlds are the ones that become the greatest of leaders. I saw a tweet this morning. Matt Rule has coached quarterback, wide receiver, running back, special teams, linebackers, defensive line. He's coached in the NFL. He's coached at Temple. He's coached at Baylor. Matt Rule is a leader. Well, not it's the Browns or the Panthers or the Cowboys or the Giants. If I were in charge of the coaching search, I would first go mining the leadership bucket. I would first look to talk to Matt Rule. I'll ask the voice of Monday Night Football, Joe Tessitore, what he thinks next on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz, Will Cain filling in. This is the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz on ESPN Radio. Will Cain filling in, and you can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern, where I'm often joined by the voice of Monday Night Football, Joe Tessitore, who's with me now. What's up, Tess?
What's up, Cain? And does Sinatra ever sound good on a day like today?
Always is the answer. He always sounds good on a day like today. You and I were just texting.
Yes.
Not about tequila, which you have turned me on to greatly, and the various brands I've been buying as gifts and for myself over the last couple of weeks. I appreciate that education in fine tequila.
Is that a remedy for chronic pain, or is knowing that the Cowboys season the remedy? Because I know most people turn to fish oil or perhaps heat therapy or cardio. But is tequila now, or is Black Monday the better remedy for the season you just had to endure, the chronic pain of every Sunday of your life?
When it's really bad, when it's bad, it's been Casamigos, and when it's really bad, it's been the Azul.
Casadrones.
And then the fish oil is just maintenance. Joe Tessitore here on the Will Cain Show. No, we were texting not just about tequila, we were texting about the coaching search. We're talking about the stock market, the ups and downs, the who's hot moment in the NFL coaching carousel. And I have laid out that I really am looking for, and I think everybody would say this when it comes to a cliche, but I don't know if they would do it when it comes to action time. I'm looking for a leader of men, Tess. I'm looking for a guy who can pivot, who is flexible, who's versatile, but who also can put 52 men on a field all pulling in the same direction. I want a leader of men more than I want a scheme genius. Who do you think teams should be looking at this offseason?
Well, I think it's a fine balance when you size up NFL coaching candidates, and I think we often get caught up in the stock price. And I want smart. I want a leader. I do want somebody who can adapt. But I think what we tend to do every time we have these coaching carousels is we measure a stock price and we play to the stock price of who has the uptick, who's trending in the right direction. How do you both win the press conference, galvanize, and feel like you're grabbing something where you still have more to go with it? And sometimes when you do that, the wheels spin a little bit, and you sometimes overlook the obvious, and you can get caught, just grabbing that tech sector IPO and not thinking about what's the real revenue and productivity I want for years to come.
Right.
I think there are some guys out there that you never want to say a can't miss, but I do think there are guys out there where you say they have the foundation. Perhaps they are the second chance kind of guys. Perhaps they're the guys that have shown flexibility, adaptability, versatility, and not just get caught up in the stock price. Throw a name out there, Cain, and I'll give you my reaction.
Well, listening to you, talking to Joe Tessitore here on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugatz, Will Cain filling in. Listening to what you're describing, I separated coaches into three buckets: scheme geniuses, leaders, and retreads. And I said this, Tess. I said, let's not just assume when I use the word retread, it's a negative. I'm not using it as a pejorative.
There are three retreads out there I actually love right now.
And that's what I was picking up, what you were putting down. But I wanted to point out, Bill Belichick existed in that category at one point, right? He would have been considered a retread after his Cleveland Browns tenure. So I'm going to ask you about guys that would exist in that bucket, because I think that's where you're leading me. So let's talk about Ron Rivera first. The reports are...
Well, Ron's a great leader of men. I mean, you can't ask for a better leader of men in terms of people, having a coach who guys are going to want to play for, of understanding both the, he's got the smarts, he has the experience, he's led a team to the highest heights. But he's going to be hired within the next few hours here. Do you not agree?
Yes, but most likely the reports indicate by the Washington Redskins.
So, I think conversations beyond the obvious, obviously Josh McDaniels could be a very, very good fit somewhere. I think especially in New York with a young franchise quarterback who already has a year of experience now. And I think Mike Pettin deserves a look. But I think the one guy that it stuns me, and I would just make this a combo deal if I was out there, if I had a franchise that perhaps had elite offensive talent, like majority of first-round picks on an offensive line, and a quarterback who's about to score a major contract, and an all-pro running back, and a number one receiver, and maybe the only piece of the puzzle they have to find is a young tight end, perhaps I would turn to the Kubiaks. Perhaps I would say to Gary, whose health now is no longer an issue, and he's been by the side of Mike Zimmer, who swears by him every day in Minnesota, and young son Clint Kubiak, who's the quarterback coach, who's a ready-made offensive coordinator. Perhaps I would just turn the keys to the car over to a Super Bowl winning head coach.
Wow, Joe Tessitore here on the Dan Le Batard Show.
Still is only in his 50s, by the way.
How old is Kubiak? He's in
his mid to late 50s.
That's not a name that's being bandied about. I mean, you brought up the IPO.
It is not, and it blows my mind that it's not being thrown out there, because he is, in coaching circles, as respected, as experienced, as capable, a leader of men, smart, and the health issue is gone, and his son is an up-and-coming coaching star who can fit right in as the play caller, who has lived and breathed the scheme every day for 20 years.
Gary Kubiak, who is 58, is a name that Joe Tessitore says
Clint,
we should.
His son Clint, too, who's currently the quarterback's coach for the Vikings.
Talking about package deals, I did see this a little bit earlier. I can't remember who put it out, Tess, but one of the names that's also flying under the radar is Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale. And the suggestion was he's also a package, perhaps with LSU passing game coordinator Joe Brady, who unlocked Joe Burrow this year.
Yeah, and Joe Brady is a guy who, in talking to some ADs on the college level over the course of the last month, obviously all of a sudden perked up on the short list. And obviously the foundation of his career is as a young, precocious, up-and-coming NFL assistant coach. So getting back to that place would be good for him. Wink's a different kind of guy. He's definitely a player's coach and a rough and gruff coach who understands scheme, has a great sense of identity. Greg Roman undoubtedly is a guy who you'd be very impressed with if you ever sat with Greg. And what he's been able to do, and we talked about this, I believe, a couple months ago, of his ability to go into the lab and say, I'm not just going to fall prey to the homogenous NFL ways of we can deconstruct something and build it to fit what we want to be. And in moving forward, understanding, and we've had this conversation before, and this is why I like Greg Roman so much, the natural resources that you're mining in college football to now create what will be an NFL offense, I think Greg Roman has proven that he may be the best guy out there to adapt to that.
Hey, Tess, why do you think, back to Gary Kubiak, why do you think his name's not coming up? Mike McCarthy's name comes up. Retread names do come up. Why not Kubiak?
Mike McCarthy's name comes up. Hey, listen, I'm just going to pull back the curtain a little bit. Mike McCarthy's name comes up because Mike McCarthy has been incredibly strategic and thoughtful in how he's gone about the past 6 years of activating on certain media relationships, of letting people come into his world and see how he's been going about this to put forth his candidacy. Mm-hmm. And it's created media momentum.
Right.
This is what I'm telling you. Don't get fooled with media momentum and perceived stock prices the way certain owners do. Understand the way GMs and other coaches would think of this. And if you do that and you say, okay, so Kubiak hasn't been self-promoting and hasn't been pushing himself out there, just take a step back and think about the candidate I just mentioned.
Right. That is fascinating about how you play the media. I think it definitely benefits a lot of these coaching candidates, who they like, who is popular, who is friendly with the media. I think Ron Rivera is a very fine coach. I also think he's had 3 winning seasons in 9 years, and I think the media likes him very much, and that is undoubtedly going to help him land a job. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, but I'm going to say that is definitely something that's helped him along in this coaching search.
I think it's a very good crop out there, though, Cain. I will tell you that. I think this is a very good year to be shopping out there on the market. I think Kubiak and his son as a combo deal is a slam dunk for a team like the Dallas Cowboys if they have an opening. I love Greg Roman. I love everything about Greg Roman. I think he is smart. I think he's flexible. Mm-hmm. I like Robert Saleh. I think he can motivate guys. I think he's earned it. I think he's proven it. I think he's going to get a job. Eric Bieniemy is a guy who, you talk to everybody from that Chiefs tree. They swear by him. He's a leader of men. He understands scheme, and he can produce points. I like both Buffalo coordinators. I think Leslie Frazier is another guy that nobody's talking about. And we know, of course, he's had the foundation of being an HC before. And Brian Dable, who's a play caller who had spent time with Saban, he had spent time in New England. He's a guy who's very, very smart and capable, too. And then a young star who's not going to get a look, but I think in the coming years, who I'm very impressed with, is Kevin Stefanski, the young offensive coordinator for the Vikings.
And that's not even mentioning Lincoln Riley, Matt Rule, and so many other names that are going to be a part of this coaching carousel. It's the voice of Monday Night Football, Joe Tessitore on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Joe has Buffalo Bills against Houston Texans, 4:30 Saturday on ESPN ABC in the NFL wildcard round this coming weekend. Tess, I'll be watching. I think one of those teams actually could make a run. I like where the Bills are.
Cain, are you working Friday?
I am. You want to come back on?
I'll mark down a 5 p.m. Eastern so that we can have our playoff preview on Friday.
Done. Sold, Tess. Thanks, man.
All right, brother.
Take care.
Be well.
It's the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz. Will Cain filling in. All of this depression, all of this, looking back, everything coming to an end, let us turn to a brighter side. Let's look forward. Let's look to the playoffs. Let's look to some teams even that didn't make the playoffs. Let me be nice for a moment. Before I get to Carson Wentz and I talk about the most overpraised quarterback in NFL history, it's true, let me throw some rose petals at a different quarterback, a different team, and a different coach. Next on ESPN Radio. All right, on this segment, it's the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app, Sirius XM Channel 80. Will Cain filling in for Dan Le Batard today. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern, all those same television and radio channels, presented by Progressive Insurance. I promised to throw roses. I promised not to bury Caesar, but to praise him. I promised to be nice in this segment, but I don't think I can do it for a full segment. I'm also going to have to be somewhat mean. Mean in the sense that I'm going to be a realist. Mean in the sense that I'm going to push back on a public relations campaign. Me in the sense that facts don't care about your feelings. But let's start with nice. There are two teams today that deserve immense praise. There's one player that deserves some moderate praise. Here's how it goes. The first team that deserves praise is the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins were not just counted out this season. They were not just a team that people dismissed as tanking. They were not just a team who were described as unethical. In fact, the Miami Dolphins were described as immoral early in the season when they embarked on what looked like certain losing week after week. He's my friend, and I'm staring at him through 2 panes of glass right now as he records some podcast across the way. But ESPN football analyst Dominique Foxworth and frequent contributor to the Dan Le Batard Show went on Get Up where he had this to say about the Miami Dolphins' approach to this season.
It's unethical and morally reprehensible as far as I'm concerned, because we understand how dangerous football is as a game. Putting guys out there in this type of danger is a problem, but you can put that aside. I think as an employer, you have an obligation to provide as safe a working environment as you can, and also provide the people an opportunity to succeed. These young men have committed their lives to getting to the NFL, and the expectation is once you get to the NFL, the team will do the very best that they can do to make sure you succeed. They are not doing this there, and that's not fair, because these guys are physically paying the price. These guys are putting bad film on tape because they're not trying to win, and it's going to shorten their careers. And you know who's going to benefit from them? The owner and the general managers and maybe the potential future coach. These guys aren't going to benefit from it. They're going to be out of the league, having their careers ruined by a selfish team like the Dolphins.
Some 17 weeks later, the Miami Dolphins finish the season 5-11 and finish on a high note. Yesterday, they beat the New England Patriots. This wasn't a Patriots team mailing it in week 17. This wasn't a Patriots team sitting at starter. This was a Patriots team fighting for the second seed in the AFC. But the Dolphins went out there and gave the Patriots a battle and deprived them of a first-round bye in the AFC playoffs. Want to know how big a deal that is? Paul Himbakides, the researcher for Get Up, put this out earlier today. Going back, I believe, over a decade, the teams to represent both the AFC and the NFC in the Super Bowl have been the 1 and 2 seed. If you have to play the first weekend of the playoffs, you got a long road to the playoffs. Long road to the Super Bowl. You want that first round bye. You want that 1 and 2 seed. You want what the Miami Dolphins deprived the New England Patriots of. Brian Flores has done an amazing job of keeping, yes, a team that was tanking, and yes, a team that wasn't very good, competitive all season long, and a team that tried its heart out week after week. The Miami Dolphins deserve a ton of praise. Second, let us praise the Tennessee Titans. This was a team that looked like it was going nowhere with Marcus Mariota at quarterback. They made the change midseason. As my friend and ESPN football reporter who appears frequently on the Will Cain Show, Jeff Darlington, said they would do. They turned to Ryan Tannehill. And Tannehill has been awesome. They have secured a playoff spot. The Titans will play Wild Card Weekend, and when they do, they will lead out there with the NFL's rushing leader in Derrick Henry and the NFL's passing leader in terms of passer rating in Ryan Tannehill. Henry and Tannehill led the league in their respective categories this season. Mike Vrabel, Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry deserve a ton of praise for who they have been this season. But I told you this was going to be a Jekyll and Hyde segment, that I would praise two teams effusively and praise one only moderately. And that's going to come off as mean, and that's going to come off as an insult, when in fact it's just being a realist. I have never seen a quarterback receive more favorable media treatment. I've never seen a better PR team. I have never seen anyone more universally praised than the very good quarterback who just rolled through an incredibly weak schedule in December in Carson Wentz. Every time I turn on my television, whether or not it's September, April, or December, there is some analyst telling me that Carson Wentz is an MVP candidate. In some cases, most of the time from my friend Dan Orlovsky, telling me that he's had the second best season of any quarterback outside of Lamar Jackson, as he just went through a loss to the Miami Dolphins, a win over the 4-12 New York Giants, 2 wins over the 3-13 Washington Redskins, and 1 win over the 8-8 Dallas Cowboys. And that man is the second coming of Patrick Mahomes. Carson Wentz is a very good quarterback with the best PR team in the NFL. That's not being mean. That's being real. Good luck this weekend as he starts his very first, in fact, plays in his very first NFL playoff game of his career. But you'd be forgiven for not knowing that. Tim Hasselbeck, next.
An interesting creature inhabits the flat, arid plains of many an automobile dashboard. The bobblehead. It's most agreeable and will nod along to anything, despite having no brain function. But when the bobblehead hears how Geico not only saves people money, but also gives them access to licensed agents 24/7 online and over the phone, he'll nod even more vigorously because he knows you should switch. Because yes, switching to Geico is a no-brainer. Easy, bobblehead, easy. You're going to get whiplash. 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 Get whiplash.